The Arizona Territory, 1885. A woman steps off the dusty stagecoach in this scorching heat, clutching a letter that promised marriage and security. But instead of a prosperous ranch and waiting husband, she finds charred timbers and smoke-stained stones. What happens next reveals the extraordinary courage of the human heart and proves that sometimes when life burns everything to ashes, it creates space for unexpected miracles to bloom. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eleanor May Blackwood pressed her forehead against the cracked window of the stagecoach as it rumbled across the unforgiving Arizona desert. At 24 years old, with chestnut hair already showing streaks of silver from 3 years, caring for her ailing father through his long battle with tuberculosis, she clutched a bundle of 18 letters that had carried her hopes across the continent. Each envelope bore the same confident handwriting: William Richardson, Saguaro Springs Ranch, Arizona Territory. The stagecoach lurched to a halt, sending dust swirling through the windows like copper-colored mist in the merciless afternoon sun. "Saguaro Springs," announced the driver, a weathered man named Hank who'd barely spoken 10 words during the 4-day journey from San Francisco. Eleanor straightened her traveling dress, a practical navy cotton that had seen her through her father's funeral 8 weeks prior. In her carpetbag lay one other dress, her grandmother's gold locket, a well-thumbed medical guide, and exactly $38.16, the remainder of her inheritance after paying for the journey south. William Richardson had written that he would meet her at the stagecoach stop. His letters had described a modest but thriving cattle ranch, a man of 40 with a prosperous business, and most importantly, a desire for companionship that matched her own desperate need for security. Eleanor had answered his advertisement in the San Francisco Chronicle, not from romantic dreams but from stark necessity. Her father's medical expenses had consumed their small savings, and without family or prospects in California, the Arizona Territory offered her only realistic hope for survival. The driver offered his hand as she descended, her boots sinking into the red dust of what passed for Saguaro Springs Main Street. The town consisted of a general store with a faded sign, a blacksmith shop with an open-air forge, a saloon where 3 men lounged on a rickety porch, and a small building marked Territorial Office that apparently served as post office, courthouse, and sheriff's office combined. "Where might I find William Richardson?" Eleanor asked, scanning the handful of people moving through the dusty street. No one approached to greet her. Hank spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Don't know any Richardson. Check at Pearson's store." He began unloading her trunk, a battered leather case that had belonged to her grandfather. Inside Pearson's general store, the air smelled of coffee beans, leather, and sundried tomatoes. A thin man with a magnificent mustache looked up from his ledger as she approached. "Excuse me, I'm looking for William Richardson. I was told he ranches near here." The man's brow furrowed deeply. "Richardson? Can't say I know that name, miss. How long has he been in these parts?" 8 months, according to our correspondence." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "He arranged for me to. We're to be married." Pearson set down his pen. "Mail order arrangement?" "Yes." Heat crept up her neck. "Well, now that's a shame. We get fellas passing through, setting up correspondence, making promises." He shook his head slowly. "Truth is, there's no William Richardson owns land around Saguaro Springs. Never has been, far as I know." The words hit Eleanor like physical blows. 8 months of letters, plans made, her entire inheritance spent on this journey. She gripped the edge of his counter to steady herself. "Is there perhaps a misunderstanding? Maybe he ranches further out?" "Miss, I've been here 12 years. Know every rancher, every homesteader within 50 miles. No Richardson. Sorry to say it, but you've been swindled." Eleanor's vision blurred, but she refused to cry in front of this stranger. "Thank you for your honesty." Outside, she stood in the punishing heat, her trunk at her feet, holding 18 letters from a man who didn't exist. The stagecoach was already disappearing down the road, trailing dust like a ghost. "You all right, Senorita?" A woman's voice came from behind her. Eleanor turned to see a Mexican woman in a worn but clean dress, concern etched on her sun-weathered face. I was expecting to meet someone, but it appears." Eleanor's voice broke. She couldn't finish the sentence. "Consuelo Mendez," the woman introduced herself. "My husband Miguel owns the blacksmith shop. You came for a husband, see?" Eleanor nodded, shame burning through her chest. "Happens more than you'd think. Men writing letters, real men, fake men, men who change their minds." Consuelo touched Eleanor's arm gently. "What will you do now?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I don't know. The honesty felt like another failure. I spent everything I had getting here. "The hotel charges $3 a night," Consuelo said. "Too much for most." She hesitated. "There's a ranch about 5 miles south. Used to belong to the Henderson family before they were killed in the raid last month. Been empty since then." "Raid?" Eleanor asked. "Bandits, they say. Though some blame Apache." Consuelo crossed herself. "Ranches burned bad, but the small house for workers still stands. Not much, but it has walls and a roof. Is it available?" "Nobody owns it now. Territory claims it, I suppose. Miguel and I occasionally bring supplies to anyone who needs shelter there. If you can make it habitable, you could stay for a while. At least until you figure out what's next." Hope stirred, fragile but real. "Could you direct me there? Better than that. Miguel can drive you tomorrow morning, but Senorita." Consuelo's expression turned serious. "It's isolated. Nearest neighbor is 7 miles away. You'd be alone." "I've been alone before," Eleanor said quietly. That night she spent 3 of her precious dollars at the hotel, lying awake on a lumpy mattress, listening to raucous laughter from the saloon below. She read through William Richardson's letters one final time, looking for clues she'd missed. His handwriting was educated, his sentiments respectful. He'd mentioned spring cattle drives, water concerns, and a favorite horse named Thunder. Every detail now felt like deliberate deception. By dawn, she'd made her decision. She would go to the Henderson Ranch. She would survive. She would not return east to failure. Miguel Mendez proved to be a man of considerable strength and few words. His wagon rattled over barely visible tracks through cactus-dotted landscape. And scattered mesquite, Eleanor sitting beside him, her trunk secured in the wagon bed, watching the terrain grow more rugged with each mile. "Good hunting here," Miguel finally said, pointing to a dried creek bed running parallel to their path. "Deer sometimes. Javelina too. Consuelo will show you which plants you can eat," he added after another long silence. "Important to know. In the desert." The ranch appeared through a stand of cottonwoods like a terrible vision. The main house was nothing but a blackened shell, stone walls standing like sentinels around charred timbers. A barn had partially collapsed, its roof gone entirely. But as Consuelo had promised, a small adobe structure about the size of Eleanor's childhood parlor remained standing, its walls scorched but intact. As Miguel helped her down, the acrid smell of old smoke became noticeable. He frowned, walking toward the adobe building. "That's not right." Eleanor followed, her stomach tightening. The door hung askew on its hinges. Miguel pushed it open, and the morning light revealed devastation. Everything inside was damaged, a small cot overturned, a wooden table splintered, the packed earth floor littered with broken crockery. The small iron stove remained, though tipped onto its side. "Fire must have happened here too," Miguel said grimly. "Maybe during the attack." Strange they didn't finish it. Eleanor stood in the doorway, feeling as though she might shatter. First William Richardson, now this. Was the universe conspiring against her? The root cellar seems intact, Miguel pointed out, gesturing to a trapdoor in the floor. And the well still has water. The walls here can be repaired, but it will take work. I can work, Eleanor said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. She'd already lost everything. This burned shelter was still more than she'd had that morning. Miguel studied her for a long moment. Consuelo will come check on you in a few days. Bring food, maybe some tools. After he left, Eleanor stood alone among the ruins. Sunlight streamed through the single window, illuminating motes of ash still floating in the air. The small adobe felt like a physical manifestation of her shattered plans. But as she explored further, she discovered reasons for hope. The root cellar, access through the trapdoor in the floor, remained untouched. Inside she found several jars of preserved beans and corn, some hardtack, and a few candles. Behind the house, a small vegetable garden had been trampled, but not destroyed. A few tomato plants struggled upward, and what looked like squash vines spread along one side. She spent her first night wrapped in the 2 blankets she'd packed, sleeping on the packed earth floor after sweeping it clean of debris. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by strange sounds of the Arizona wilderness howls that might have been coyotes, the rustle of nocturnal creatures, and once, something large moving past the window that made her heart freeze in her chest. Dawn came with breathtaking beauty. From the doorway, she could see mountains painted purple and gold in the distance, a hawk circling lazily above the mesquite. For a moment, the beauty made her forget her desperate circumstances. The next days blurred into a rhythm of survival. She cleared debris from the adobe, salvaging what she could: a dented copper pot, a cracked ceramic plate, a bent fork. She learned to start fires using the tinder box she'd brought, though her attempts at cooking over the small stove resulted in more burned meals than edible ones. Her hands, soft from years of respectable indoor work, began to blister and callous. Her traveling dress tore on a protruding nail, forcing her to change into her spare clothing. She rationed the preserved food carefully, supplementing it with vegetables from the struggling garden. On the 5th day, as she attempted to repair the door using pieces of a broken crate, she heard hoofbeats. A rider approached through the morning heat, haze tall, broad-shouldered on a paint horse that moved with unusual quiet. He reined in 20 feet from the adobe, studying her work. His hat brim shadowed his face, but she could see high cheekbones, bronze skin, and black hair, longer than was customary among white men. Though dressed in fringed buckskin pants and a cotton shirt like any frontiersman, something about his bearing was distinctly different. He said nothing. "Good morning," Eleanor called out, uncomfortable with the silence. She wiped her hands. On her skirt, "I'm Eleanor Blackwood. I'm staying here temporarily." The rider nodded slightly but remained silent. "The building was damaged when I arrived. I'm trying to make it habitable again." Why was she explaining herself? This man had no claim on her actions. He swung down from his horse with fluid grace, ground-tying the animal with just a spoken word. Walking closer, he examined her repair work, then pointed to the door she'd been struggling with. "Wrong angle," he said, his voice deep and precise with only the slightest accent. "Needs support here." He traced a line with his finger. Those were his only words, but his meaning was clear. He retrieved a knife and small axe from his saddlebags and, without asking permission, began shaping a proper support from the broken crate wood. His movements were precise, economical. Eleanor watched, uncertain whether to be grateful or offended by this unsolicited help. The man worked silently, measuring twice, cutting once. Within an hour, he'd installed proper hinges fashioned from strips of leather and wood. When finished, he gathered his tools. "Captain," he said simply, touching his hat brim. "Thank you, Mr. Catton. I'm afraid I can't pay you for—" He shook his head, cutting off her offer. "Neighbor," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the south. Before she could respond, he mounted his horse and rode away, disappearing as quietly as he'd arrived. Eleanor stared after him, confused and oddly comforted. Her first visitor in this vast isolation hadn't been threatening or judgmental. He'd seen a problem and fixed it without expecting anything in return. The encounter gave her renewed energy. She worked through the afternoon, using Catton's support structure to properly hang the door. As sunset approached, she attempted to cook beans over her newly righted stove, managing to produce something almost edible. That night, lying on her makeshift bed of blankets on the now clean floor, she thought about the strange day, a silent man appearing out of nowhere, helping without explanation, then vanishing. In San Francisco, such behavior would have been suspicious. Here it felt different, essential perhaps. The days that followed fell into a pattern. She rose before dawn, worked on house repairs, tended the recovering garden, and coaxed life back into the damaged structure. Consuelo arrived on the 7th day, bringing cornmeal, dried beef, and a bundle of cooking herbs. She surveyed Eleanor's progress with approval. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You're stronger than you look," Consuelo observed, noting the improved state of the adobe. "That door, did you do it yourself?" "I had help," Eleanor admitted. A man named Catton stopped by. Consuelo's eyebrows rose dramatically. "Catton helped you? You know him?" "Know of him. Apache scout, works sometimes with the army at Fort Granite. Lives alone in a hidden valley about 10 miles south." Consuelo handed Eleanor a wrapped package of fresh tortillas. "I brought these, and this." She pulled out a bundle of newspapers. "Thought you might want news from California." As Consuelo prepared to leave, she paused. "There's talk in town. Some folks wondering about the single woman living out here alone. I told them you're doing fine, but be careful. Not everyone wishes strangers well." After Consuelo left, Eleanor read the newspapers by candlelight. Political upheavals in Washington, economic opportunities in California, social scandals that had seemed important weeks ago now felt irrelevant. Her world had narrowed to these few acres, to the daily challenge of survival, to the gradual transformation of a burned ruin into something resembling a home. 2 weeks after her arrival, she woke to find a stack of chopped wood piled neatly beside the door. No note, no explanation. When Catton rode past that afternoon, she waved her thanks. He touched his hat but didn't stop. More gifts appeared: a repaired water bucket by the well, fresh venison hanging from a mesquite tree wrapped in clean cloth, a basket of wild berries. Each time, Catton would ride by and acknowledge her silent thanks with a nod before continuing on his way. Eleanor began to anticipate these visits, though visit was too generous a term. Catton rarely dismounted, never entered her home, spoke perhaps 3 words per encounter. Yet his presence became a reliable part of her routine. "My roof leaks when it rains," she mentioned one day as he paused to water his horse at the well. "Ah, look," he replied, the longest sentence he'd yet spoken to her. True to his word, he returned 3 days later with materials and spent an afternoon repairing the damaged roof. Eleanor attempted to help, but his efficiency made her feel clumsy. She settled for preparing coffee, which he accepted with a nod. "Why do you help me?" she asked during one of these coffee breaks, desperate to understand his motivation. Catton looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "Neighbors help neighbors. But I'm not really— I don't belong here. You're here," he said simply. "That's enough." Something in his matter-of-fact acceptance made her eyes sting. When was the last time someone had accepted her presence without question or judgment? As autumn approached, Eleanor's days filled with preparation. Consuelo had taught her to preserve food, to recognize signs of weather change, to prepare her shelter for the occasional violent storms that swept through the territory. The adobe had become genuinely habitable thanks to her own labor and Ketten's intermittent assistance. She developed routines, morning chores, afternoon repairs, evening reading by candlelight. Her hands, once soft, now bore the calluses of honest work. Her body, weakened during her father's illness, had grown strong from physical labor. One October afternoon, as she harvested the last of the tomatoes, she heard voices approaching through the mesquite. 2 men on horseback, neither of them Ketten. "Well, well," the first called out, reining in his horse. "Look what we found, Jake, a city girl playing frontier wife." The speaker was perhaps 35, with a trimmed mustache, and clothing that suggested he occasionally visited town. His companion, younger and nervous-looking, shifted in his saddle. "Good afternoon," Eleanor said warily, straightening from her garden work. "Afternoon, miss. I'm Nathaniel Harding. This here's Jake. We ranch about 5 miles north." He leaned forward in his saddle. "Heard talk about a lady living alone out here. Thought we'd introduce ourselves." "That's kind of you," Eleanor replied carefully. Something in Harding's manner set her on edge. Kindness doesn't cover it. Dangerous thing. A woman alone. All sorts of incidents can happen. His gaze moved slowly over her figure. "Maybe you need someone looking out for you. More regular-like." Eleanor's heartbeat quickened. "I'm managing well, thank you." Managing and thriving are different things. Harding dismounted, tying his horse to a nearby fence post. "Why don't you pour us some coffee? We'll talk about how things work in these parts." "I'm afraid I was just heading inside," Eleanor said, backing toward the adobe. "Now, that's unfriendly. When folks make the effort to visit, proper courtesy demands." A single gunshot echoed across the clearing. Harding's hat flew off his head. Ketten sat his horse 30 yards away, a smoking rifle across his saddle. His face was expressionless, but his message was clear. "Morning, Harding," he said, his voice carrying an undertone Eleanor had never heard before. Harding's face reddened. "This isn't your business, Apache." "Lady's a neighbor," Ketten replied. "That makes it my business." The tension stretched like a bowstring. Jake was already edging his horse away. Harding retrieved his hat, his movements jerky with suppressed anger. "This ain't finished, Scout." "It is," Ketten said flatly. Harding mounted his horse with unnecessary violence. "Come on, Jake. Some folks don't appreciate good intentions." After they rode away, Eleanor found herself shaking. Ketten holstered his rifle and dismounted. "You all right?" he asked. "Yes, thank you." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't think they meant. That is, perhaps I misunderstood." "You didn't misunderstand." Ketten's jaw was tight. "Harding's got a reputation. Thinks lone women need his protection, whether they want it or not. Why did you happen by? You don't usually visit in the afternoon." For the first time, Ketten looked uncomfortable. "Saw them heading this direction. Thought I should check." The realization struck her. "You've been keeping guard." "Paying attention," he corrected. "Different thing." Eleanor sank onto the adobe's single step, delayed reaction setting in. "Where I come from, a woman's reputation can be ruined by far less than living alone in the wilderness. Here, it seems I need to worry about more than gossip." Ketten sat on the step beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Different dangers, different rules. You've done well adapting." "Have I? Sometimes I feel like I'm barely holding on. Like one strong storm could blow away everything I've managed to build. That's frontier life. For everyone, men, women, families. The difference is having people to lean on when the storm blows." She looked at him directly. "Why do you help me, Ketten? Really? You owe me nothing." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he said, "Had a sister once, Elena. Like you came west with her husband. He died their first winter. She tried to make it alone. His hands tightened on his knees. Found her the next spring. I'm sorry, Eleanor whispered. Me too. Never got there in time to help her. I see. Kenton stood abruptly. Won't let that happen again, if I can help it. The raw honesty in his voice left her speechless. Kenton untied his horse, preparing to leave. Kenton, he turned. Back, thank you. For today. For everything. He nodded, touching his hat brim. I'll ride more regular for a while. Just till Harding gets the message. After he left, Eleanor remained on the step as darkness gathered. The encounter with Harding had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. But Kenton's protection, his quiet vigilance, provided an unexpected comfort. For the first time since arriving in Arizona, she realized she wasn't truly alone. She had neighbors, even if one of them barely spoke and the other had become an unwelcome presence. Night fell, bringing the symphony of cicadas and distant coyote calls she'd learned to find comforting. Inside the adobe, she lit her evening candle. The small stove glowed with coals, her few dishes gleamed clean on the shelf, and her patch of garden showed promise for winter vegetables. She'd come to Arizona seeking security through marriage to a stranger. Instead, she'd found something different: self-reliance, community support, and perhaps, in the quiet protection of Kenton, the beginnings of something she hadn't dared hope for. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Winter in the territory wasn't as harsh as in the north, but it brought its own dangers. Men like Nathaniel Harding existed in every frontier community. But tonight, in her restored adobe, with the memory of Kenton's protection fresh in her mind, Eleanor May Blackwood felt something she hadn't experienced since her arrival: genuine hope for what might come next. November brought cooler temperatures to the Arizona territory, and Eleanor woke before dawn as had become her habit, stoking the small stove to chase away the morning chill. The adobe now felt less like a temporary shelter and more like a home she had created through sheer determination. She had salvaged an old rocking chair from the burned main house, repaired it with Kenton's guidance, and positioned it near the stove. In the quiet morning darkness, she allowed herself the luxury of sitting for a few moments, planning her day over a cup of coffee brewed from carefully rationed beans. The transformation of the adobe continued each day. She'd hung fabric over the single window, scrubbed the smoke stains from the walls, and smoothed the packed earth floor until it was almost comfortable underfoot. The roof no longer leaked, the door hung properly on its hinges, and she'd constructed a small table from salvaged wood using the tools Consuelo had brought during her last visit. "Morning," came Kenton's voice from outside. Since the encounter with Harding, he had taken to checking on her most mornings, though he never lingered long. "Coffee's hot," she called through the door, adding automatically, "if you have time." She heard his boots on the step, the rustle of movement. When she opened the door, she found him holding a large bundle wrapped in deerskin. "For the floor," he explained, "and walls, if needed. Gets colder than you think at night." Eleanor accepted the bundle, surprised by its weight and the softness of the tanned hides. "Did you hunt these?" "Traded. Part of winter preparations." He glanced past her into the adobe. "You've made good progress here. Thanks to your help." She stepped aside. "Please come in. It's too cool to talk outside." For the first time, Kenton entered her home. His presence seemed to fill the small space, making everything appear more cramped, yet somehow safer. He moved carefully, aware of his size, accepting the coffee mug she offered. "Nice work on the walls," he observed, running his hand along the surface where she'd applied a mixture of clay and lime to brighten the interior. "I had a good teacher, indirectly." Eleanor smiled, remembering his early roof repairs. "Though, I'd welcome more direct instruction if you're willing." Something shifted in Kenton's expression, not quite surprise, but a kind of recalculation. Winter is coming. Not like northern territories, but has its own dangers. What kind of dangers? Flash floods in the arroyos, north winds that cut through clothing, water freezing at night, thawing by day, makes travel unpredictable. He moved to the window. Signs are everywhere. Birds changing patterns. Plants. Preparing. Question is, are you prepared? The practical challenge energized her. Tell me what I need. For the next hour, Catton outlined winter survival with the patience of someone who'd done it countless times alone. Food preservation priorities, fuel requirements, emergency protocols for flash floods or unexpected cold snaps. Eleanor took notes on precious paper, asking questions that revealed both her ignorance and her determination to learn. "You're taking this seriously," he commented, a note of approval in his voice. "I have to. There's no one else to rely on." She hesitated, then added, "Though I appreciate having someone to learn from. Teaching is easier than explaining after the fact." Catton finished his coffee, setting the mug carefully on her small table. "Rain comes tomorrow, probably. If you need help securing anything." "Actually, there is something." Eleanor moved to the door, gesturing outside. "The garden wall part of it collapsed last week. I've tried to rebuild it, but the stones keep falling. I'll fix it today." He was already pulling on his gloves. "Anything else?" "The root cellar entrance sticks. Takes all my strength to open it. I'll look at that too." After he left, Eleanor found herself humming while she worked, a habit she'd lost during her father's illness and the desperate months following. There was something comforting about Catton's competence, his willingness to share knowledge without condescension. She spent the day implementing his suggestions, moving firewood closer to the adobe, double-checking her preserved food inventory, preparing emergency supplies in case she couldn't reach the well or garden for days. When Catton returned in the afternoon with tools, she worked alongside him, learning how to properly construct a stone wall, how to adjust the fit of wooden frames that had swollen with moisture from the changing weather. "You learn quick," he remarked as she successfully completed a repair under his guidance. "I had to learn many things quickly these past months." She handed him another tool, though masonry wasn't among them until recently. "Everyone has different skills, just a matter of applying them." "What skills did you have before becoming a scout?" Eleanor asked gently. Catton paused in his work, the question seemingly unexpected. "Was a hunter for my people, then a warrior." He carefully positioned another stone in the garden wall. "Army noticed I could track anything across any terrain, made me a scout." "Your people Apache?" "Chiricahua, White Mountain Band." He tested the wall's stability. "There should hold through anything the sky delivers." As predicted, the rain arrived the next morning. Eleanor woke to the sound of water drumming on the roof and flowing in rivulets past her door where Catton had dug drainage channels. She'd followed his advice, preparing hot food early while she still could, filling water containers, organizing supplies within easy reach. The temperature dropped dramatically as the day progressed. The newly installed deerskins proved their worth, holding warmth against walls that would otherwise seep cold. Eleanor fed the stove regularly, reading by candlelight, working on mending. That required no natural light. On the second day of the storm, a knock startled her. She opened the door to find Catton rain-drenched and leading a pack horse. "Checking on you," he said simply. "Come in, please. You must be freezing." He stamped water from his boots and entered, shaking moisture from his buckskin jacket. "Just wanted to make sure you're managing." "Better than I expected, thanks to your preparations." She poured hot coffee, noting his slight shiver. "How do you travel in this?" "Carefully. Know the landscape well enough to navigate by feel, but I won't stay long." "Storms got more too." "Deliver." They sat by the fire, the storm creating an intimate atmosphere despite the formal distance between them. Eleanor noticed details she'd missed before: intricate beadwork on his knife sheath, a scar along his jawline, the careful way He chose words as if each one were precious. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured. He nodded. "Why do you live alone? I mean, don't most Apache live with their people, their tribe?" Kenton stared into the fire for a long moment. Times change. Some adapt, some don't. Some find a middle path. "And you chose the middle path?" "Not exactly chose. After the last conflicts, many bands sent to reservation. Not a good place, sickness, poor land, corrupt agents." His voice was matter-of-fact, not bitter. I refused. Army officer who knew me offered alternative scout for military. Keep to myself. Stay away from conflicts. "So you're caught between two worlds," Eleanor said softly. "All frontiers are borders between worlds," he replied. "You also live between worlds, not city woman anymore, not quite frontier woman yet." Fair observation. She considered her response. "Fear drove me here, fear of starvation, of having nowhere to go." William Richardson's letters promised security, even if they proved false. And now? She looked around her small, warm adobe. "Now I'm learning that security might be something I create, rather than something given to me by others." Kenton finished his coffee and prepared to leave. At the door, he pulled a wrapped package from his saddlebag. "Almost forgot. Consuelo sent this. Said you'd need it before winter truly arrives." Eleanor unwrapped the gift to find thick wool yarn in earthy tones and 2 knitting needles. "For winter evenings," Consuelo's note read. "Keeping your hands. Busy helps the mind stay calm." "Tell her thank you," Eleanor said, touched by the thoughtfulness. "She's asked me to bring you to town next week after this storm passes. Says there's things you'll need before winter truly settles in. You'll take me if you want to go." After he left, Eleanor ran her fingers through the soft yarn. Consuelo's gift represented more than practical necessity. It was a connection to the community, an acknowledgement that she belonged here enough to warrant investment in her comfort. The storm lasted 4 days. When it finally cleared, the world had transformed into a landscape of vibrant clarity, the distant mountains sharper against the sky, the desert washed clean, new growth already pushing through the red soil. Eleanor's first venture outside required effort to clear mud from the door, but the fresh air and sunshine lifted her spirits immeasurably. True to his word, Kenton arrived a week later with a wagon rather than his usual horse. "Town day," he announced. "Roads are passable now." The journey to Saguaro Springs took just over an hour, allowing Eleanor to truly appreciate the vastness of the territory. Kenton pointed out landmarks, explained seasonal changes in the landscape, shared practical knowledge about navigation and weather signs. "You know this land intimately," she observed. 10 years makes a place part of you." He guided the wagon around a washout in the road. "Or you become part of it." In town, Eleanor experienced the curious sensation of being simultaneously invisible and observed. Men tipped their hats politely but avoided eye contact. Women's gazes lingered with undisguised curiosity. Consuelo greeted her warmly at Pearson's General Store, immediately pulling her aside for private conversation. "How are you really managing?" Consuelo asked, her voice low. "Truth now." "Better than I expected. Kenton has been." Eleanor searched for the right words. "He's been invaluable." Consuelo's eyebrows rose dramatically. "Kenton helping someone so regularly? That's unusual. He says neighbors help neighbors. Neighbors help neighbors in emergencies. What Kenton does for you is different." Consuelo studied her face. "Do you understand what people are beginning to say?" Heat crept up Eleanor's neck. "No. That Kenton, who hasn't formed friendships with anyone since he arrived here, is taking a special interest in Eleanor Blackwood in his own peculiar way. That's ridiculous. He barely speaks to me. Sometimes actions matter more than words." Consuelo's expression grew serious. "I'm not gossiping to embarrass you, but you should know that Nathaniel Harding has been telling anyone who'll listen that Kenton has claimed you, Claimed me like property? That's frontier thinking for some men. Harding's been telling people that Catton's interference prevents other interested parties from paying court. Eleanor felt anger rise. I'm not interested in anyone's court, least of all Nathaniel Harding's. Good. But be careful. Harding's pride is wounded, and winter isolation can make men reckless. Their shopping expedition yielded wool blankets, additional preserved foods, medicine supplies, and sturdy boots better suited to Arizona winters than her eastern shoes. Catton waited patiently, loading purchases into the wagon, occasionally offering opinions about quality or usefulness. At the apothecary, Eleanor noticed him examining a display of patent medicines with unusual attention. Looking for something specific, she asked. Wintertime ailments, he responded. Easier to prevent than cure out here. Sound advice. Back in California, my father's illness taught me the value of preventive care. What kind of illness? Tuberculosis. The word still carried weight. 2 years of watching him fade, trying everything. Doctors, medicines, home remedies. I'm sorry. Simple words, but his tone conveyed genuine understanding. My mother died of lung fever when I was young. No medicines, no doctors, just watching and hoping. The shared experience of loss created a moment of deeper connection. Eleanor found herself looking at Catton with new understanding. His solitude wasn't just preference. It was protection against further loss. As they prepared to leave town, Pearson flagged them down from the store. Mrs. Blackwood, letter arrived for you. Eleanor accepted the envelope with trembling hands. The return address read San Francisco. Her heart sank, probably another bill collector or legal notice about her father's remaining debts. Bad news? Catton asked, noting her expression. I'm afraid to open it. Want privacy? She considered refusing, but something in his steady presence gave her courage. No, it's fine. Breaking the seal, she quickly scanned the contents. Relief flooded through her. It's from my father's law partner. They've settled his estate, paid his remaining debts, and, she swallowed hard, there's a small sum remaining. Enough to start over somewhere else, if I wished. You. Thinking of leaving? Catton's voice was carefully neutral. Eleanor folded the letter thoughtfully. A month ago, I might have leapt at the chance now. She looked around the small frontier town, then back at Catton. Now I'm not so sure. I've put down roots here. Something flickered in his eyes' relief. Perhaps. Roots are good. Take time to consider before pulling them up. The journey back passed in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by Catton pointing out animal tracks in the mud or explaining how to read the approaching weather. Eleanor found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw, the way he scanned. The landscape constantly, always aware, always vigilant. Catton, she said as they neared her adobe, why did you become a scout for the army? It seems an unusual choice for someone from your background. His hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the reins. Complicated times required complicated choices. After the conflicts, most options were bad. Scouting let me stay on ancestral lands, use traditional skills, avoid reservation. But working for the military that fought against your people, wasn't that difficult? Individual soldiers different from government policy. Many good men caught in bad situations. He pulled the wagon to a stop outside her adobe. Besides, scouting kept me near what matters most, which is the Hidden Valley. He seemed to make a decision. Would you like to see it? The question caught her off guard. Your home? Special place, sacred to my people. Few outsiders ever permitted. The invitation hung between them, clearly significant. I would be honored, she said carefully. Tomorrow then, if weather holds. That night Eleanor could barely sleep, anticipation and curiosity keeping her mind active long after she should have been resting. What did this invitation mean? Why had Catton, so private and self-contained, decided to share something so personal? Morning brought clear skies and mild temperatures. Captain arrived just after sunrise, leading 2 horses instead of the wagon. "Trail too narrow for wheels," he explained. "You ride?" "Not well," she admitted. "It's been years." "Daisy is gentle," he said, indicating the smaller mare. "She follows Silver without guidance." The journey began with Eleanor feeling awkward and uncomfortable on horseback, but Captain's patient instruction helped her relax. They traveled south, leaving the established trails for paths that seemed to exist only in Caton's memory, winding through increasingly rugged terrain. After 2 hours, they reached what appeared to be a sheer rock wall, the end of their journey. But Caton dismounted and led the horses through a narrow gap barely visible among the boulders. Eleanor followed, ducking low branches, marveling at how completely the passage was hidden from casual view. The path twisted sharply, then opened suddenly onto a vista that took her breath away. Before them spread a verdant valley perhaps a mile wide and 3 miles long, encircled completely by steep rock walls. A clear stream ran through its center, feeding what appeared to be cultivated fields on one side and natural meadow on the other. Trees clustered along the water's edge, providing shade and shelter. At the far end, nestled against the rock wall, stood a structure that combined elements of traditional Apache wickiup and frontier cabin. "Ketan," she whispered, "it's beautiful. My people called it Teen Sa Glade Big Water Valley, though the stream isn't big by most standards. Was sacred place used for healing ceremonies, vision quests." He led the horses toward the structure, now just my home. As they drew closer, Eleanor could see the care with which the place had been constructed. The main structure was built of stone and timber, with a smoke hole in the center of the roof. Around it clustered several smaller structures, what appeared to be a storage building, a smokehouse, and a corral where several horses grazed peacefully. "You built all this yourself?" "Over many years, when not scouting, I come here. Tend crops, hunt, keep traditions alive." There was quiet pride in his voice. "It's remarkable, so hidden yet so complete. That's the point, safe from both worlds when needed." He showed her around the valley, the fields where he grew corn, beans, and squash in the traditional Apache way. The stream that never ran dry, even in the harshest drought. The medicinal plants he cultivated, based on his grandmother's teachings. Throughout the tour, Eleanor noticed how the tension that always seemed to inhabit Ketan's shoulders when in town or at her adobe had disappeared. Here, he moved with easy confidence, speaking more freely than she'd ever heard. At midday, they sat beneath a cottonwood tree near the stream, sharing a simple meal of dried venison, corn cakes, and wild berries. The peacefulness of the valley settled over Eleanor like a physical presence. "I understand now," she said quietly. Why you choose to live between worlds. With this to return to, the compromises must seem worthwhile." Ketan nodded slowly. "Valley provides what's necessary: food, shelter, connection to ancestors. But still feels incomplete sometimes. One person alone, even in paradise, eventually hears too much silence." The admission seemed to cost him something. Eleanor found herself wanting to reach out, to touch his hand, but held back. "Is that why you helped me, to break the silence?" "Partly." He met her eyes directly. "Began as duty to Elena's memory. Helping lost woman survive, as I couldn't help my sister. But became something else. What did it become?" Instead of answering directly, he asked, "The letter from San Francisco, will you go back?" The question caught her off guard with its apparent change of subject, but she recognized its deeper significance. "I don't know. There's opportunity there, with some money now, familiarity, perhaps less daily struggle. But I've discovered strength here I never knew I possessed. I've learned skills, built something from ruins." She looked around the valley, then back at him, and found connections I never expected. Catton seemed to be weighing something in his mind. Finally he said, "There's something you should see." He led her to a small clearing near the base of the eastern wall. There, partially hidden by brush, stood the entrance to a cave. Catton lit a torch and guided her inside. The cave opened into a surprisingly large chamber, its walls adorned with ancient paintings, figures of animals, people, celestial bodies, all rendered in red and black pigments. "My ancestors left these," he explained. "Stories of creation, hunting, war, peace. History of my people." Eleanor moved closer, awed by the artistry and preservation of the images. "How old are they?" "Oldest ones, perhaps 1,000 years. Newest, maybe 200. He touched one image reverently. "My grandmother brought me here as a child. Said as long as these remain, our people remain. Thank you for showing me." Eleanor said softly, understanding the profound trust this represented. "One more thing." Catton moved deeper into the cave, holding the torch higher. At the back wall stood a small wooden chest, European in design, but decorated with traditional Apache beadwork and symbols. Catton opened it carefully, revealing contents that seemed incongruous in this ancient space: books, papers, a compass, writing implements. "My learning," he explained. "From both worlds." Eleanor examined the books with surprise: works of philosophy, natural science, even poetry, in both English and Spanish. "You're educated in the Western sense." "Army chaplain. At Fort Granite taught me to read when I first became scout. Said knowledge is weapon and shield both." A rare smile touched his lips. He didn't expect me to develop such hunger for it. "This explains so much about you," Eleanor said. "The way you speak, your understanding of both cultures. Few know this side of me. Most see only the scout, the civilized savage useful to the army." His voice held no bitterness, only statement of fact. "Easier that way, usually. Why show me?" Catton replaced the books carefully, closed the chest. "Because you see people, not just their usefulness. Because you rebuilt from ashes instead of running away. Because," he hesitated, "because I want you to make your decision about staying or leaving with full knowledge, not partial truth." The weight of his words settled between them. This wasn't just about showing her his home. It was about showing her himself, the complete person beyond the silent scout who fixed her roof. As they emerged from the cave into the late afternoon sunlight, Eleanor felt a profound shift in her understanding of Catton, of this place, of her own situation. The decision that had seemed complicated that morning now felt clearer. "If I stayed," she said carefully as they walked back toward the horses, "would there be a place for me here? Not just at the adobe, but here, in this valley?" Catton stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "That's what I'm trying to say, Eleanor. There could be, if you wanted it." The simple statement, delivered without flourish or elaborate declaration, touched her more deeply than any romantic speech could have. This wasn't about rescue or convenience. It was about genuine connection, about shared understanding of what it meant to live between worlds. "I need time to think," she said honestly. "Of course." He nodded, no disappointment visible in his expression. "Winter gives plenty of time for thinking." As they rode back toward her adobe in the fading light, Eleanor found her mind filled. Not with pros and cons, lists of reasons, or practical concerns. Instead, she thought about the peace she'd felt in the hidden valley, the connection to something ancient and enduring, and the quiet strength of the man who had offered to share it with her. Some choices she was beginning to understand couldn't be made through logic alone. Some required listening to deeper wisdom, the kind that recognized when you had found, against all odds and expectations, exactly where you belonged. December brought unexpected challenges to the Arizona territory. Eleanor woke one morning to find frost patterns decorating her window, a rare sight that both delighted and concerned her. The cold snap had arrived earlier than anyone predicted. and she found herself reviewing Catton's winter preparations with renewed attention. Her adobe had become truly comfortable over the past weeks. The deerskin rugs warmed the floor, the repaired stove heated the space efficiently, and she'd created clever storage solutions for her growing collection of preserved foods and medicines. What had once been a burned-out worker's shelter now felt like a genuine home, created through her own determination and Catton's steady guidance. But the unseasonable cold brought new worries. The garden, which had continued producing despite the advancing season, now lay withered beneath the frost. The water in her buckets had developed a thin layer of ice overnight. Most concerning, the chickens she'd acquired from Consuelo, 3 hardy hens that provided precious eggs, huddled miserably in their makeshift coop. Eleanor was contemplating ways to better insulate the chicken coop when she heard approaching hoofbeats. Catton appeared through the mesquite, his breath visible in the cold air. "Morning," he called, dismounting with his usual fluid grace. Cold came early. "I wasn't prepared for this," Eleanor admitted, gesturing toward the frost-covered landscape. "The chickens are suffering." Catton examined the co-op with a critical eye. "Need better shelter. Walls too thin. Can it be fixed?" "Built new would be better. Bring them inside for now." "Inside, with me? People and animals share shelter in cold." Old way of survival. The idea of bringing chickens into her carefully maintained home didn't appeal, but Eleanor recognized the wisdom in his suggestion. Together, they created a temporary enclosure in one corner of the adobe, using an old crate and some spare fabric. As they worked, Eleanor found herself studying Catton more openly than before. Their day in the hidden valley had changed something between them. A barrier had fallen, though neither had put words to this shift. He seemed more relaxed in her presence, less guarded in his speech. "Weather like this will drive game down." "From higher elevations," he observed, securing the chicken enclosure. "Good hunting, if you know where to look." "Will you teach me?" The request slipped out before she'd fully considered it. Catton looked surprised. "To hunt?" "Not necessarily with a gun," Eleanor clarified, "but to recognize tracks, understand animal movements, know what's safe to eat. If I'm staying through winter, I should learn these things." "You've decided to stay then?" His voice was carefully neutral. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "The winter, certainly. Beyond that," she took a breath. "I'm still thinking about what you showed me, what you offered." He nodded, accepting her uncertainty without pushing for more definitive answers. "Fair enough. And yes, I'll teach you tracking. Tomorrow, if cold holds, but no new snow falls." True to his word, Catton arrived at first light the next morning, bringing an extra coat made of rabbit fur and sturdy moccasins to replace her impractical boots. "Quieter," he explained, helping her lace them properly. "Animals hear leather boots from far away." The tracking lesson became one of the most extraordinary experiences of Eleanor's life. Catton moved through the winter landscape with uncanny awareness, pointing out signs she would have missed entirely: a disturbed patch of frost where a deer had bedded down, the distinctive prints of a javelina family, bark stripped from a mesquite tree by hungry rabbits. "Everything leaves a story," he explained, kneeling to examine a set of delicate tracks. "Learn to read it. You're never lost or hungry." By midday, they had identified the territories of 3 deer families, located a covey of quail, and tracked a coyote to its distant den. Eleanor's mind reeled with new knowledge, not just the practical skills of tracking, but a deeper understanding of how the entire ecosystem functioned together. "You see the world differently," she said as they rested beneath a stunted oak. "Most people I know view the land as something to be conquered, tamed, exploited. You see it as a living text to be read and respected." "Both ways have purpose," Catton replied. "Land provides if treated with respect, takes away if disrespected. Simple balance. Not so simple for most settlers to understand. That's why they struggle more than necessary." He handed her his canteen. Your adobe, you worked with what remained instead of forcing new structure. Same principle. His observation struck her as profoundly insightful. She had indeed adapted to what existed rather than attempting to impose an entirely foreign vision, and had found greater success because of it. Is that what you've done in your valley? Worked with what exists rather than against it. Try to. A rare smile touched his lips, not always successful, but learning. As they continued their lesson, Eleanor realized Kenton was teaching her more than tracking. He was sharing a philosophy of life, one that emphasized observation before action, adaptation rather than rigid imposition, and respect for natural rhythms even when they seemed inconvenient. The day ended with a successful hunt, a plump rabbit that Kenton caught with startling quickness. He showed her how to prepare it properly, wasting nothing, offering traditional prayers of thanks that she found unexpectedly moving. Tomorrow, I'll show you how to preserve meat without salt, he said as they approached her adobe in the fading light. Smoke method my grandmother taught me. I'd like that. Eleanor hesitated, then added, would you stay for dinner? I have vegetables that need eating before they spoil from the cold. It was the first time she had explicitly invited him to share a meal rather than simply offering coffee during his work visits. The invitation hung between them, weighted with significance beyond the simple words. Yes, he said after a moment. I'd like that too. The evening unfolded with unexpected warmth. Eleanor prepared a stew with the rabbit and her remaining vegetables. Kenton brought in extra firewood, tended the stove, and even entertained her with a story about his first disastrous attempt at scouting, told with self-deprecating humor she hadn't known he possessed. As they ate, seated on opposite sides of her small table, Eleanor found herself studying his hand-strong, capable hands that could track a deer through rocky terrain, build a smokehouse, or gently repair a chicken coop. Hands that represented both worlds he inhabited, the traditional skills of his ancestors and the practical adaptations required for survival in changing times. What are you thinking? Kenton asked, noticing her gaze. That you embody something remarkable, the ability to honor tradition while embracing necessary change. I think that's what I've been trying to learn these past months. Survival often demands both. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Flexibility bends but endures. Like the mesquite in storms, Eleanor observed. Exactly. He seemed pleased by her understanding. After dinner, they sat by the stove, the comfortable silence punctuated by occasional conversation. The chickens clucked softly in their temporary enclosure. Outside, the temperature continued to drop, but inside the adobe, warmth prevailed, not just physical warmth, but something deeper and more nurturing. I should go, Kenton said eventually, though he made no immediate move to leave. Temperature dropping further. Need to check my own animals. Of course. Eleanor walked into the door. Thank you for today's lessons. For everything, really. At the threshold, he turned to face her. In the golden light of the oil lamp, his expression held something she hadn't seen before. A question, perhaps, or possibility. Eleanor, he said quietly, the valley is always open to you. Whether for visit or... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. Or for more permanent arrangement, when you decide. The simple statement, delivered without pressure or expectation, touched her deeply. This wasn't the desperate plea of a lonely man, or the calculated offer of someone seeking domestic convenience. It was an invitation to share something genuine, when and if she chose to accept it. Thank you, she said simply. That means more than I can express. After he left, Eleanor sat by the stove, her mind replaying the day's events. The tracking, lessons, the shared meal, the quiet conversations, all had revealed layers of Kenton she hadn't fully appreciated before. His intelligence, his humor, his profound connection to both the natural world and his cultural heritage. More than that, she realized she'd never felt pressured or diminished in his presence. Unlike William Richardson's letters, which had promised, Security at the cost of independence. Catton offered partnership that seemed to enhance rather than restrict who she was becoming. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Eleanor was feeding the chickens in their temporary quarters when a knock sounded at the door. Expecting Catton, she opened it with a smile that quickly faded. Nathaniel Harding stood on her doorstep, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said stiffly, "might I have a word?" Every instinct warned against allowing him inside, but the bitter cold made conversation on the doorstep impractical. "Briefly," she agreed, leaving the door open despite the chill. "What can I do for you, Mr. Harding?" "I've come to apologize for my behavior during our previous meeting." The words sounded rehearsed. It was ungentlemanly and inconsiderate. Eleanor studied him skeptically. What prompted this sudden change of heart? Harding shifted uncomfortably. Reverend Morris suggested that my approach might have been lacking in Christian charity, and Sheriff Collins mentioned that harassment of homesteaders is taken seriously in this territory. So it wasn't genuine remorse, but pressure from authority figures. Still, a tense peace was better than active hostility. "I accept your apology," Eleanor said carefully, "though I hope you understand my caution." "Completely understandable." Harding's gaze moved around the adobe, taking in the improvements, the signs of permanent settlement. "You've done well with this place. Better than most would expect." "Thank you." An awkward silence fell. Harding cleared his throat. "There's another matter. Word around town is that you've received funds from California. That you might be leaving." Eleanor tensed. "My financial affairs are private, Mr. Harding." Of course." He raised his hands apologetically. "I only mention it because if you were considering selling this place before leaving, I might make an offer. Fair price cash money." The real purpose of his visit became clear. It wasn't about apology at all, but business opportunity. "I haven't decided my future plans," Eleanor said truthfully. "But I'm not currently interested in selling. The offer stands should you change your mind." Harding replaced his hat. Territory's a hard place for a woman alone, especially with winter coming on. Sometimes practical considerations outweigh sentiment. The implied threat was subtle but unmistakable. "Thank you for your concern," Eleanor replied coolly. "But I'm managing quite well." After Harding left, Eleanor found herself unusually unsettled. His visit represented exactly the kind of pressure Catton had warned about, the assumption that a woman alone must eventually surrender to practical considerations rather than forge her own path. When Catton arrived later that morning, she immediately told him about Harding's visit. "Not surprised," he said, his expression darkening. "Man wants this land, has for years." "But why?" "It's just a small adobe and garden plot." "Location. Controls access to water for miles around. Previous owner refused to sell too." Catton's meaning was clear without being explicit. The convenient bandit raid that had killed the Hendersons might have been something else entirely. "You think?" "Harding was responsible for what happened to them. Can't prove anything. But timing convenient for his interests." The possibility sent a chill through Eleanor that had nothing to do with the winter temperature. "Should I be worried about my safety? He won't act directly." Too many eyes watching now, especially with Sheriff Collins paying attention. Catton considered, "But winter brings isolation. Opportunities for accidents. What should I do?" Catton was quiet for a moment, weighing options. Could come to the valley, stay there until spring. The offer was practical, not just personal. The hidden valley was defensible, remote, unknown to most settlers. She would be safe there. "I'd need to bring the chickens," Eleanor said, testing the idea. "Valley has plenty of space for chickens." A hint of amusement touched his voice. "Better coop too." The decision crystallized in her mind. "Just until the worst of winter passes," she clarified. "Not as a permanent arrangement, not yet." "Understood." He nodded, respecting her boundaries. We'll go tomorrow. Bring only what matters most. Can come back for the rest when safer. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Eleanor had spent the evening sorting her possessions, separating the essential from the merely useful. Her trunk could hold only so much, and Catton had emphasized traveling light for the narrow trails. As she packed the last few items, her father's medical guide, Consuelo's yarn, the small store of money from San Francisco, a sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Expecting Catton, she opened the door without caution. Sheriff Collins stood on her doorstep, his expression grave. Behind him waited Consuelo, her face tight with worry. "Mrs. Blackwood," the sheriff said, "I'm afraid there's been an incident. Catton was ambushed on his way here this morning." Eleanor's heart seemed to stop. "Is he alive?" Consuelo interjected quickly. "But injured. Miguel found him on the South Trail." "How badly?" "Gunshot wound to the shoulder. Lost blood. But Miguel got it stopped. He's at our place now. I need to see him." Eleanor was already reaching for her coat. "That's why we're here," Sheriff Collins said. "To escort you safely. Whoever did this might still be watching your place." "Harding," Eleanor said with certainty. The sheriff's expression remained carefully neutral. "No evidence of that yet. But the timing is suspicious, given his interest in your property. The ride to the Mendez home seemed to take an eternity." Eleanor's mind filled with terrible possibilities: infection, permanent disability, the myriad complications that could follow even a minor gunshot wound. Her medical knowledge, once a comfort, now served only to multiply her fears. The Mendez home was a modest adobe on the edge of town, larger than Eleanor's, but built in similar style. Miguel met them at the door, his blacksmith's apron still spotted with blood. "He's awake," Miguel reported. "Asking for you." Catton lay on a narrow bed in the back room, his upper body wrapped in bandages, his bronze skin unnaturally pale against the white linens. But his eyes were clear and focused. When Eleanor entered, "Careless," he said by way of greeting. "Should have been more alert." Eleanor knelt beside the bed, fighting the urge to touch him, to physically confirm he was truly alive. "What happened?" "Ambush near the creek crossing. 2 riders, faces covered. Shot from behind." His mouth tightened with self-recrimination. "Amateur mistake." "Professional shooters," Miguel corrected from the doorway. "They knew what they were doing." "Did you see their faces?" Sheriff Collins asked. "No, but one rode a horse with distinctive white stockings. Saw it as they fled." Catton's gaze met the sheriff's meaningfully, same markings as Harding's new mare. Collins nodded slowly. "Not proof, but worth investigating. I'll ride out to his place today. Be careful," Eleanor warned. "If he's desperate enough to attempt murder." "Oh, I won't be going alone," Collins assured her. "Taking a few deputies who owe me favors. Harding may have money, but he's not popular with everyone." After the sheriff left, Consuelo brought hot coffee and fresh tortillas. "You'll stay with us," she told Eleanor firmly, "until this is resolved." "I can't impose." "Not imposing," Miguel interrupted. "Safer here. Town has many eyes, many friends." Eleanor looked to Caton, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "They're right. Town's safer for now. Valley plan must wait." The following days established a new routine. Eleanor stayed in the Mendez's spare room, helping Consuelo with household tasks and tending to Catton's wound. The injury, while serious, had miraculously missed vital structures. With proper care, he would recover full use of his arm, though the process would take time. Sheriff Collins and his deputies had found no conclusive evidence linking Harding to the shooting, but their investigation had uncovered other concerns: questionable land deals, cattle with altered brands, former employees with stories of intimidation. Though not enough for an arrest, it was sufficient to keep Harding under close observation. "He'll be careful now," Collins told them during a visit. Knows he's being watched. Probably wait for things to quiet down before trying anything else. What about my adobe? Eleanor asked. My chickens? Deputy Parker's been checking daily. Everything's secure so far. But I wouldn't recommend returning until we're certain. The danger has passed. As December deepened toward Christmas, Eleanor found unexpected comfort in the forced proximity to both the Mendez family and Ketten. Consuelo taught her traditional Mexican holiday recipes. Miguel included her in his blacksmithing work when extra hands were needed, and the children, 2 girls aged 8 and 10, adopted her as a temporary aunt. Most significantly, her relationship with Ketten evolved in ways that might have taken months under normal circumstances. Confined to bed rest initially, he had no choice but to engage in conversation rather than action. Eleanor discovered depths to his thinking she'd only glimpsed before: his knowledge of 3 languages, his philosophical outlook that blended Apache wisdom with Western concepts, his dry humor that emerged more frequently as his comfort with her increased. Never talked this much in my life, he commented one evening as she changed his bandages. Going to develop a reputation as chatterbox. Eleanor laughed. I think your reputation as the silent, mysterious scout is safe. 3 full sentences hardly constitutes excessive talking. His hand caught hers as she finished securing the bandage, his touch light but deliberate. Eleanor, when this is resolved. Yes? Still want to show you the valley. Still want. He paused, seeming to search for the right words. Still want you to consider it as home. The simple statement hung between them, its significance unmistakable. This wasn't just about safety or practicality anymore. It was about something deeper, a connection that had grown steadily despite every obstacle. I am considering it, she said softly, more seriously than you might realize. A week before Christmas, Sheriff Collins arrived with news. Nathaniel Harding had left the territory suddenly, reportedly heading for California after selling his ranch to a cattle company from Texas. Just disappeared? Eleanor asked, suspicious. Not exactly. Collins looked uncomfortable. There was an incident. Harding and his men attempted to intimidate a family of settlers near the Southern Creek. Didn't realize the family had relatives visiting Apache relatives from the reservation. Ketten, now able to move around with a sling, raised an eyebrow. Which band? White Mountain. Your people. Collins met his gaze steadily. Led by someone named Nanton, said he was your cousin. A brief smile touched Ketten's lips. Second cousin. Strong warrior. Well, your second cousin made it very clear to Harding that certain behaviors wouldn't be tolerated. No violence. Just a demonstration of numbers and resolve. Harding decided his business interests lay elsewhere rather suddenly. The relief was palpable. With Harding gone, the immediate threat had passed. Eleanor could return to her adobe, resume the life she'd been building, but she found herself unexpectedly hesitant. Something wrong? Consuelo asked later, noticing Eleanor's distraction as they prepared dinner. I thought you'd be celebrating Harding's departure. I am relieved, Eleanor admitted, but also confused. I've been so focused on defending my place, my independence. Now that the threat is gone, I'm not certain what I want next. Consuelo's wise eyes studied her. Sometimes we fight so hard for the right to choose that we forget to consider what we're choosing. The adobe represents your independence, your ability to survive alone. But is surviving alone what you truly want? The question lingered in Eleanor's mind through the evening and into the night. She had indeed proven she could survive alone, had transformed a burned ruin into a habitable home, had learned skills she'd never imagined possessing, had earned the respect of the community through her own efforts. But was survival enough? Or was there something more to be found in the connection she'd forged with Ketten, in the hidden valley that represented not just safety but belonging? The next morning, she found Ketten sitting on the Mendez's porch, watching the sunrise. His Arm remained in a sling, but his color had improved, and he moved with increasing confidence. "I've been thinking," Eleanor said without preamble, sitting beside him. "Dangerous activity," he replied, a hint of teasing in his voice. "Perhaps," she gathered her courage. "The sheriff says it's safe to return to my adobe now. Good news." "Yes, but I'm not certain I want to." Kenton turned to look at her fully, his expression carefully neutral. "Meaning?" she asked as they harvested winter greens that continued growing despite the season. "Carefully," he replied with the hint of humor that emerged more frequently now. "And not always successfully. Some years better than others. And now?" "Now. We manage together. Your knowledge, my knowledge. Both stronger." The concept of complementary strength, rather than competition or dominance, represented everything Eleanor had begun to value. Their partnership wasn't about erasing differences or one person submitting to another's vision. It was about creating something greater through combined wisdom and shared purpose. January brought unexpected weather, a week of heavy rains that transformed the valley stream into a rushing river and kept them largely confined to the dwelling. During this enforced proximity, their relationship deepened through long conversations, shared meals, and the natural intimacy that developed between two people building a life together. Eleanor learned the stories behind Kenton's collection of books, the Shakespeare volume given by an army chaplain who recognized his intelligence, the botanical guide traded from a traveling doctor, the Journal of Lewis and Clark that had inspired his own detailed recordings of the natural world. In turn, she shared her own history, her childhood in San Francisco, her father's legal career and subsequent illness, her desperate decision to answer William Richardson's advertisement. "I've never told anyone how ashamed I felt," she admitted. "One evening as rain drummed on the roof, answering a stranger's letters, agreeing to marry someone I'd never met. It seemed so desperate." "Survival requires difficult choices," Kenton replied without judgment. "My people faced worse: surrender to reservation or continue fighting unwinnable war. No perfect answers in such times. How did you choose your path? Between worlds?" Kenton was quiet for a moment, stoking the fire before answering. Didn't see it as choice at first. Just survival. Army officer offered scouting position instead of reservation or prison. Seemed obvious path. And later? Later understood. What I was really choosing, not just survival, but way of life that honored ancestors while adapting to new reality. Middle path. He looked at her directly. Like you choosing burned adobe instead of returning to San Francisco in defeat. The comparison startled her with its accuracy. She had indeed chosen a middle path, neither returning to her former life nor fully embracing conventional frontier womanhood. Instead, she had forged something unique, something that honored both her heritage and her emerging identity. As January gave way to February, Eleanor began accompanying Kenton on longer expeditions beyond the valley. Her tracking skills improved daily, and she developed a deeper understanding of the territory's complex ecology. Together they hunted, gathered medicinal plants, and monitored the subtle signs of approaching spring that most settlers would have missed entirely. During one such expedition, they encountered a family of settlers struggling to free their wagon from mud after heavy rains. Without hesitation, Kenton dismounted to help, and Eleanor followed suit. The family, parents with 3 young children, initially regarded Kenton with visible suspicion, but as the work progressed, barriers began to fall. When the youngest child developed a coughing fit, Eleanor retrieved herbs from her medicine pouch and quickly prepared a tea that eased the symptoms. The mother's gratitude transcended cultural differences, and by the time the wagon was freed, a tentative connection had formed. "We're heading to new homestead near Twin Buttes," the father explained as they prepared to continue their journey. "Been told there's good water there." "Twin Buttes has water," Kenton confirmed, "but trail ahead dangerous after rains. Creek. Crossing often floods." He proceeded to draw a map in the dirt, showing an alternative route that would take longer but offers safer passage. The settler studied the map with growing respect. "Much obliged for this knowledge, and for the medicine for my boy. If you establish near Twin Buttes, we're not far," Eleanor offered. "I'm learning traditional healing. If your children need help, we'd be grateful," the mother replied, her initial wariness replaced by genuine warmth. Not many doctors in these parts willing to travel to isolated homesteads. As they watched the wagon depart, Eleanor felt a sense of possibility expanding around her. "We could do more of this," she said thoughtfully. "Bridging communities, sharing knowledge." "Dangerous path sometimes," Ketten cautioned. "Many still fear what they don't understand. But necessary path, I think. Otherwise, how do we build something better than what came before?" Ketten studied her face, then nodded slowly. "Difficult journey worth taking with right companion." By mid-February, Eleanor had established her own routines and responsibilities. Within their shared life, she tended the chickens, which had adapted happily to their new environment, expanded the medicinal herb garden with varieties she remembered from her father's garden in San Francisco, and began organizing Caton's collection of books and journals into a proper library. Most significantly, she started documenting traditional Apache healing practices that Ketten remembered from his grandmother, combining this knowledge with her own medical understanding from her father's textbooks. The resulting journal represented something unique and valuable, a bridge between wisdom traditions that might otherwise have remained separate. "This could help many people," Ketten observed one evening as he watched her sketching a plant with remarkable accuracy. "Both my people and settlers suffer from same illnesses, same injuries, different treatments often, but both have wisdom." "That's my hope," Eleanor replied. "To create something that honors both traditions without diminishing either." Their peaceful routine was interrupted in early March by an unexpected visitor. Eleanor was tending the garden when Ketten, who had been repairing fishing nets by the stream, suddenly tensed and reached for his rifle. "Someone's coming," he said quietly. "Single rider. Not trying to hide approach." They waited together at the valley's hidden entrance, watching as a familiar figure appeared on the narrow trail. Miguel Mendez, riding with obvious urgency. "Ketten, Eleanor," he called, catching sight of them. "Thank God I found you." "What's wrong?" Eleanor asked as he dismounted. "Sickness in town. Bad. Started with Travis' family last week, now spreading. Fever, rash, difficulty breathing." Miguel's face was drawn with worry. "Doctor from Fort Granite came but left after 2 days. Said nothing to be done." "How many sick?" Ketten asked. 20, maybe more by now. 3 dead already, old Mrs. Lawson, young Travis boy, and Pearson's baby." Miguel looked directly at Eleanor. "Consuelo sends for you. Says you might know something that could help." Eleanor felt a weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. Her medical knowledge was largely theoretical, supplemented by practical experience with minor ailments and injuries. This sounded like a serious epidemic, perhaps influenza or scarlet fever. "I don't know if I can help," she admitted. "I'm not a trained doctor. Consuelo says you understand both settler medicine and traditional ways. Says sometimes the answer comes from combining knowledge, not just from one source." Eleanor glanced at Ketten, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "You've been preparing for this," he said quietly. "Not by choice, perhaps, but through everything. You've learned." The decision crystallized in her mind. "I'll need to gather supplies. Medicinal herbs, clean bandages, my father's medical text." "I'm coming with you," Ketten stated firmly. "The town might not welcome." "Doesn't matter," he interrupted. "Where you go, I go." The journey to Saguaro Springs took on a dreamlike quality for Eleanor. Familiar paths now traveled with urgent purpose. The landscape a blur as they rode at a pace that balanced speed with safety for the horses. Miguel rode ahead, his knowledge of the quickest routes proving invaluable. They arrived at dusk to find the normally quiet town transformed by crisis. Several houses displayed black cloth over their doors, the traditional sign of illness. Within, the saloon had been converted into a makeshift hospital, with pallets laid out in rows for those too sick to remain at home. Even from a distance, Eleanor could hear the sounds of coughing and labored breathing. Consuelo met them outside her home, her face lined with exhaustion but brightening at their arrival. "Eleanor, thank God. And Ketten, I wasn't sure you would both come." "Of course we came," Eleanor said, dismounting quickly. "Tell me everything you know about this illness." Inside, Consuelo described the progression of the disease, beginning with fever and headache, developing into severe cough and difficulty breathing, sometimes accompanied by a distinctive rash across the chest and back. The youngest and oldest suffered most severely, with several children and elders already in critical condition. "Sounds like measles, possibly complicated by pneumonia," Eleanor said, consulting her father's medical text. "The fever and rash suggest measles, while the breathing difficulties indicate secondary infection in the lungs. The Army doctor said the same, but offered little treatment beyond comfort measures," Consuelo confirmed. "So most would recover on their own, but the weakest would not survive regardless of intervention." Eleanor felt a surge of frustration. "There must be something more we can do." Ketten, who had been listening quietly, spoke up.